topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, California. Welcome to another Ask the Experts show where for the last 16 years, believe it or not, 16 years, we've been bringing our show to you. We have some of the finest experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Our show for the next 50 minutes, I got to tell you, I've learned so much about this topic. What I've really learned is there's so many people out there who don't understand asbestos, your legal rights, and we found, without a doubt, the top attorney, not just in California, but throughout the whole United States. I got to tell you, I'm so happy that we have attorney Michael Mandelbrot. Good afternoon, Michael.
Steve, it is always great to see you. Thanks again for the introduction. I do appreciate it very much. I have been helping victims of asbestos diseases exclusively for about 30 years now. That includes, of course, mesothelioma, lung cancer, asbestosis, and victims of other cancers as well. So I do appreciate the introduction. Thank you very much.
Funny. Michael, someone wrote in that I guess you mentioned that you've been practicing for 30 years. And for our YouTube viewers, we got a letter from said, he doesn't look like he could be in practice that long. What a compliment.
It is a compliment, almost shocking. I became a lawyer when I was 24 years old. And so graduated from college at 22, so 25 actually. I'm 57 now, so
wow,
it's
you don't
actually
look
longer than 30 years. So thank you, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, because they can see. You're a baseball guy, Michael. I gotta ask you, are you a Dodger fan?
Well, I'm in Northern California,
right?
And they're in Southern California, but we are all witnessing something historic and something unbelievable. And of course, I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani and probably the greatest baseball performance that one could ever see. And so just like in any field, whether it's lawyers, baseball, football, sports, I appreciate greatness. And I can't tell you, I'm not a Dodger fan, but I appreciate greatness, and I do appreciate seeing it.
Yeah, what he did the other night was amazing. I mean, but you know what? Everything I'd read about him, I knew something like that could happen. I wasn't that surprised. Michael, I also want to talk about, because we get a lot of the letters, and I don't know if you noticed, your YouTube numbers have gone skyrocket. And I got to tell you, there's so many people that do not understand asbestos, mesothelioma. They don't understand, because you get a lawyer on a national commercial, you don't learn anything from that commercial. And I think what I'm seeing is people have so many questions, either a relative or a friend. So I'm so glad we're doing this show. And you're just in an area that, and I got to tell everybody, this is really basically the only area Michael works in. I mean, he's not a bankruptcy attorney, he's not a criminal law attorney, and he just concentrates in this one area, right?
That is a 100% accurate. These are the people that I've dedicated my career to, and my career in helping. And you're right. There are a lot of lawyers out there who are in this field, but only few who really understand the ins and outs of the disease. And I think one of the things, and it gets you almost every time, and that is the pronunciation of mesothelioma. They see these commercials and people say, "What's that word?" and "What's this?" Yeah. And it's such a rare thing that unless somebody is touched by mesothelioma, it really doesn't impact them. And then maybe if they are touched by it, that's when they think of these commercials maybe, or what they've seen. But there's those other people, the individuals who have lung cancer, for example, or those who have digestive tract cancer or laryngeal cancer. These all could be caused by asbestos as well. But typically 98% of what I have seen is that if somebody is diagnosed with one of these other diseases, lung cancer, even asbestosis, the first thing any doctor ever looks at is not asbestos. They ask them about their smoking history. And if somebody smoked, these doctors around the country almost universally will typically point to smoking as being a primary cause of somebody's breathing difficulties, their lung cancer, their laryngeal cancer, when oftentimes these diseases are not caused by smoking, but caused by exposure to asbestos. And that's the thing. Many of the people we represent are older. They grew up in the 60s and the 70s. Maybe they fought in Korea or in Vietnam. Many were in the military. Many are blue-collar workers. And in that generation, what you will find, those who, basically grew up in the 60s and the 70s, is probably about 60 to 70% of that population smoked cigarettes. And almost everybody smokes cigarettes. So when a doctor sees somebody who's 70 years old and is now, having symptoms or even has a biopsy and gets diagnosed with lung cancer, the first thing they all point to is cigarette smoking. But oftentimes, asbestos either caused that disease or contributed to that disease. And even if there was a synergistic effect, meaning both smoking and asbestos caused the disease, and that's not determined by me, the lawyer, that's determined by a doctor, but oftentimes if there is that synergistic effect between the two of them, smoking and asbestos, which causes lung cancer, they're still eligible for compensation because that lung cancer was caused in part by exposure to asbestos. So you're right. Many people who are diagnosed with asbestos diseases never know they are entitled to compensation. Those who are diagnosed with mesothelioma typically do know that they are entitled, and it's unfortunate because many of those will typically run to their unions, for example, or many of the doctors are paid off by lawyers in my field to basically furnish them cases. And so since I don't participate in that, those mesothelioma cases are very hard to get. And that is why you will see advertising on TV all day long from probably 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and even primetime NBA finals. I remember seeing it. You'll see these mesothelioma commercials all the time. And I will note for those national viewers, the USA Today has a VA, a Veterans Edition, coming out this year on Veterans Day. It's a big magazine, and my office will have a full-page ad in there. Nice. So hopefully those of you who typically see these commercials will actually see me as well out there.
Michael, I want to get the sad part out of the way. It takes a special person like yourself, because you are probably the only area of law where you know your client is not going to live for a long time. That's just the nature of the area of law you practice. And I always hate, you give some of the greatest stories, and I always don't ever want to ask you what happened because I'm afraid of the answer. But you're in a tough area of law.
Yeah, and it was something that took a lot of getting used to very young in my career, because when you work on somebody's case, you spend a lot of time with them, whether it's on the phone or in person, and especially mesothelioma cases. You may do depositions. You might spend literally weeks with them, get to know their families, their pets. And you always, and I didn't learn this until later, but typically when you leave, there's this empty feeling, because you know that that's probably the last time that you are going to see that person. You may talk to them again, but probably the last time you are going to see them. When somebody is diagnosed with mesothelioma, the average life expectancy is maybe 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 months. They've got radical surgeries, which can be recommended by doctors. I've seen that none of them are really successful. There is a variety of experimental treatments out there, which some people, including a client of mine who is still alive, amazingly, Vito Mirabile, is extensively involved in. But other than that, there's no real treatment for mesothelioma. What makes it different from lung cancer is it's not actually cancer to the lung itself. It's the cancer to the lining of the lung, the outside. And it grows like a web, in essence, around the lung. And also, being a cancer, it's then malignant and can easily spread to other local organs all around the lung. Lung cancer, which is also often terminal itself, at least they can attempt to resect or cut out the lung cancer where the nodule or the lobe where the lung cancer is located. But you can't do that with mesothelioma. They try and peel it like an orange, is how a doctor has described it. And it has not been successful, other than if you call extending life 6 months success.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right. It is very difficult and takes a lot of getting used to. And that's why, I appreciate every time a client calls, even if I don't have good news for them, it's a chance to hear their voice. And that's why they'll tell you that I will come, hey, it's good to hear your voice. Because I don't know when I don't know when I'll get that call saying that they're no longer here. But it's something that takes a while to get used to, but it's something that definitely comes with representing victims of asbestos diseases.
Another thing in your practice, if they retain your services, they don't have to write you you charge for your service, but they don't have to write a check that day, do they?
They never have to write a check. I have in 32 years, and I had a friend call me today with some legal help, and I said, you don't want to call a lawyer, because the next thing you know, they're going to see you drive that Porsche in there, and all of a sudden you're going to start getting bill after bill after bill. We've never sent out a bill. If I investigate somebody's case and realize, hey, their disease isn't caused by asbestos and it cost me $1,500 to investigate, I don't even send out a bill. We eat those costs. Our clients are from very low socioeconomic backgrounds typically. They can't afford lawyers. And that's why, I like to have, as I call it, skin in the game with my clients. And that means the only way I get paid is if I get money for them. And then we typically take a small percentage, which is, I know, lower than other attorneys in the country, 1/3. So you're right. We never see a dime until the client starts seeing money. And if the client starts seeing, if we're successful for our clients, then our office is successful. And the more successful we are for our clients, the more successful our office is. And if we aren't successful for our clients, which doesn't happen, which has never happened, but we'll never send out a bill. There's been many times I've investigated cases and the doctor came back and said, he doesn't have asbestos related disease. It's, something else. Let's just say silicosis, which is caused by sand. Similar but different disease. Then I can't help him. I'll pay for that doctor's report and send them a letter and say, sorry, we can't help you. But I'm not going to charge them for that investigation I did on their behalf. No clients can afford that sort of thing, and nor do they want to deal with lawyers if all they know they're going to see is bill, bill, bill. So, yeah.
Michael, I've got a great story for you. I think I've shared this with you before. We've been doing the show for 16 years, and you never know who's listening. And about 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, we got a call from, I don't know if he's top attorney, doesn't really matter, but he handles the same type of cases that Michael does. And he enjoyed the show so much, he said, I would like to do a show like this. Well, we only do this area of law with Michael, but here's the thing. He said, I got to tell you, and we get calls all the time from competing firms and practices, and they always manage to put whoever our expert down, oh, I can do a better job, or they got this wrong. But here is one, I think he's one of the top attorneys next to Michael, said, I got to tell you, your expert really knows and understands what he's talking about. And I was shocked. Not that I didn't know that, but in my business, you never get that at all. That another attorney in the same field saying that the information you're providing, that you really do understand this area of law, which is amazing.
Yeah. It is an amazingly cutthroat business that we're in. And I try not to engage in that, where lawyers are competing in all kinds of ways to get these cases because they are so valuable. And so it doesn't surprise me that other lawyers would criticize or call themselves the top attorneys in the country. These are the sorts of things that you see in a lot of fields, but especially in my field. And, I will say that while I will be very quick to criticize many of the lawyers in my field, I will also say likewise, there are some incredible lawyers in my field. Incredible lawyers. I don't know if I mentioned it to you since our last show, but we have had a couple of verdicts around the country, not by me, but by some great lawyers. They are related to some things that we've talked about in the past, Johnson & Johnson's baby powder. But while I will, very quickly admit that there are some very corrupt lawyers in my field, there's also some really great lawyers around the country who I compete with. And, some of them, one of them got a great verdict, a couple of them in this in the past month. And these are unique products. And so hopefully we get a chance that I just get a chance to touch on them, because most of what we've talked about is the traditional asbestos products that people think of: insulation, construction related materials, drywall, popcorn ceilings. But these two verdicts that two attorneys around the country were successful in getting this past month, those related to some unique asbestos products that people don't typically think of. So hopefully I do get a chance to mention them. And
Yeah,
if you'd like
let's
me
do
to.
that right now. And were
Sure.
they both Johnson and Johnson, Michael?
No, they weren't. Uniquely, one of them sort of is tangentially related to Johnson and Johnson, but it was the company that supplied the asbestos fiber, or as they called it, talc, to Johnson and
Yes.
Johnson. And that was a company in northern New York called RT Vanderbilt. And that's where their mine was. And they mined this talc and they sold it around the country to a variety of customers, Johnson and Johnson. And I think, like Dr. Scholl's foot powder, things like that. Maybe even these tire companies where you'd see talc. So as this case got to trial, there was a great lawyer trying it. His name's Randy Iola out of Texas and Colorado. And he had recently gotten a case, was successful in a case against Johnson and Johnson. So they settled out of the case, and that left RT Vanderbilt left in the case. Now, the victim of mesothelioma, who was suing this RT Vanderbilt, never used Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, never worked in the mine, never lived with anybody who worked in the mine, but did live in northern New York, about a mile away from the mine.
Oh.
And this is what we as lawyers call a fiber drift case. And the allegations against RT Vanderbilt was essentially that she was exposed by the drifting of this asbestos fiber through the manufacture of the talc, and that by living within a mile of the mine, and I may be getting the facts slightly off, but I'm close, that she was thus exposed through RT Vanderbilt and developed mesothelioma. I think the jury came back and awarded, if I remember, it was like $35 million.
Wow. How long did the trial last for?
Great question. I think they're usually about, say, 6 weeks. That you've got all the experts, the witnesses, her family members, other people who lived close to the mine who can describe the conditions. You obviously have to have these fiber drift experts who talk about wind conditions, and then each side has their medical experts. So these cases, and it may be, say, 4 to 6 weeks, you may only be going, say, 3 hours a day. It's not like they're going 8 hours every day for 6 weeks. But let's say 4 to 6 weeks. Now, here's another unique case you never thought of. This one was out of California, my state. And the victim of mesothelioma in this case was not a construction worker, never somebody who was in the military, not somebody who worked on ships. He was a dentist. And he went to USC Dental School, and it just so happened that this was the second individual who went to USC Dental School, who my friend Roger Gold had represented, who had mesothelioma. And what they discovered was that for about 25 years, and I forget the name of the company. It's like Denta Supply Company or something like that, knew and manufactured what was in essence a Band-Aid used during dental surgery. So say you had a tooth removed, this was like a paste that was used as a Band-Aid when somebody had a dental surgery. And typically that would have to be, the paste would be set in and then it would have to be ground and smoothed. Well, that paste or that Band-Aid that was used in the mouth contained like 60% asbestos. And the company knew like back in 1970 and continued to sell it and manufacture. They knew. And continued to sell it up until like 1982. And that's why, in addition to the judgment in the case, I think there was punitive damages against the company for knowingly selling asbestos after, who knows what year, but say after 1972, 1973. The EPA came out and required all these companies to disclose in around 1972, 1973, what products they manufactured that contained asbestos, the make, how much asbestos was in it, and that sort of thing. So these companies all knew that their products had asbestos. I mean, I guess the talc companies could say, hey, we didn't know that the talc was contaminated with asbestos, but everybody else who made their own products, like this dental supply company, they knew. And so that's two unique cases, not construction, not a guy in the Navy, not somebody who worked on boilers or who, installed popcorn ceilings. Those are the traditional cases that we used to see 25, 30 years ago, and we still see those today. But we are learning now that there was asbestos in so many different products that there is such a variety of ways that people can get exposed, and it doesn't take a lot of exposure to get sick. Thankfully, not everybody who is exposed gets sick. As I'll say in every episode, Steve, you, me, and anyone else over the age of 50 were born in a hospital that had asbestos in it, lived in homes that had asbestos in it, and unless we were homeschooled, we all went to schools that had asbestos in them. So thankfully, not everybody gets sick who's exposed, but some do.
Those are kind of cases you would handle also.
Absolutely. The defendants like to say there's a genetic component to developing mesothelioma, but even if there is, it doesn't take away from the fact that exposure to asbestos causes that mesothelioma. I've never quite understood that defense, but I know that some defendants have tried to say that they had a genetic predisposition to getting mesothelioma. I don't even know if the medicine or the science is there for that, but it's something that the defendants have tried.
Here's a great question. This is from Bob. I think I remember him. He's in Baltimore. He said, I've been watching your show for the last year. I work on the docks here in Baltimore. What happens when you win a case? Can the company declare bankruptcy and you not realize anything? Oh, that's a good question.
It's a great question, and I'm sort of curious of what Bob's age is, because for the longest time, most of the individuals in Maryland were represented by somebody who is now deceased, who most baseball fans and most people on the East Coast would be familiar with, and his name is Peter Angelos.
Right.
And Peter Angelos represented most of the shipyard workers in Maryland, in the Baltimore shipyards. If you type in any search engine, Angelos Baltimore shipyards, lots of cases are going to come up. He was not without controversy. And I mentioned him because he also owned the Baltimore Orioles.
Baltimore Orioles, right.
Right. And so we see this, going back to Bob's question about bankruptcy, we unfortunately see this a lot because a lot of the manufacturers of asbestos products distributed products nationally. So when they're sued, they're not only sued once or twice, they might be sued 10,000 or 20,000 times for all victims who are exposed to their products nationally. An example would be like Owens Corning, the Pink Panther. People are familiar with that company. They made an asbestos product. Owens Corning Fiberglass, OCF, they made a product known as Kalo. It was a pipe insulation that was used at refineries, power plants, shipyards. They also had a contracting arm. It was used extensively in those Baltimore shipyards, extensively. And the product was known as Kalo, and it was an insulation, like I mentioned, that was used on pipes and boilers and other things. Well, Owens Corning Fiberglass was sued 50,000 times across the country, 100,000 times, and ultimately filed for bankruptcy. When these companies file for bankruptcy, you should not receive zero, but you should get something. Typically, I will say it is cents on the dollar. So these companies set up trust funds. We file claims with all of the asbestos trust funds, and both fortunately and unfortunately, there's now about 50 companies like those that Bob mentioned who are now bankrupt.
He's 63.
Yeah, so he's the typical example of the clients. And those bankruptcies are a lot of the reason why most lawyers in my field won't help people who don't have cancer anymore. Like if somebody has asbestosis, which is not a cancer, even though it is an asbestos disease, most lawyers in my field are hesitant to help them at this point because typically the only compensation we can get them is from these trust funds that I mentioned that Bob would be eligible for. And it's not just one trust fund, Owens Corning. There's probably, I can think of 30 companies that made asbestos products that were used in the Baltimore shipyards who have set up trust funds. So the good news is you do still get money if these companies go bankrupt, typically, especially shipyard workers, because all of the trust funds, or most of them, relate to individuals who worked on ships or at shipyards, that sort of exposures. But the bad thing is the amount of money that you get from these companies is typically far less than you would get if they did not go bankrupt. It's a great question by Bob.
Did the courts order these companies that set up the trust fund, or did they do it on their own?
Sort of both. The courts confirm typically a negotiation between the plaintiff's lawyers and the company. How much should be put in a trust fund for the victims? And then the judge, if the judge, after reviewing it properly, believes that there is a suitable amount of money to compensate as both past, present, and future asbestos victims, the judge then will confirm the trust. No trust will pay victims until a judge confirms it. But usually it is more a negotiation amongst lawyers. Sometimes they have to have a trial where a judge does determine how much needs to be placed in a trust for victims. And that Those trials that are known as an estimation trial are big fights amongst the, we'll call them the bigwig lawyers on both sides, in my field and on the who represent the company. Clearly, they want the lowest amount, and lawyers on my side want a greater amount. And when we're talking about trust funds, I should mention this to Bob, because there's $30 billion that is still in trust funds. $30 billion.
Wow.
When these trust funds were first set up, there was about 80 billion. When I talk about corruption and racketeering in my field, it definitely is related to that trust fund, because my question always is, where did that other 50 to 60 billion dollars go? That we're only left with 30 billion. There is no way that only 30 billion should be left in those funds. It should be, I think, closer to 45 or 50. But nonetheless, answering Bob's question, there is money. And for people like Bob, we file trust claims for them. And I look at myself as sort of a chiseler. I'm just chiseling off these trust funds, little crumbs out of that 30 billion to get these victims money. But people like Bob, who worked at shipyard, typical client, blue collar worker, you know, if we're able to get them $5,000, $10,000 and they only have asbestosis, that is still, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 that they wouldn't have seen. And typically as a lower socioeconomic, blue collar, hardworking individual, $5,000 to $10,000 is a lot of money to them. And you know, I still realize that lawyers in my field, you know, they don't realize that, you know, anymore. But most lawyers, I do, and that's why I still always want to try and help these people, even if I don't make a lot of. Clearly, we don't make as much. If I only get a guy $5,000, I probably spent more time, energy, and money on getting them that than the fee that we earn. But it's okay.
Right.
You know, we'll take the good with the valuable with the not so valuable, as long as we can help people.
Michael, I don't know if you remember, as I do, when we first started talking well over a year ago, and I was thinking, how much can you say about this? I mean, can the show even go on for a 25-minute show, yet alone a 50? I got to tell you, I'm sitting here looking at all the questions that have come in, and this could be a 3-hour show. So when you see these, you know, these national commercials and these ads, I mean, there's just so much that people don't know what's so great with a show like this. I mean, here's one of the questions. How long should the entire legal process take? Now, I know every case is different, so there's not a set time.
Great question. Yes, every case is different. Let's start with the mesothelioma cases. Okay. From start to finish, filing, depositions, discovery, these are the big cases. These are the ones you go to trial. You're doing depositions all over the country. You're hiring the best experts. You're making demands to these other companies. But also what makes these cases so valuable is how quickly they move. You can get a mesothelioma case accelerated, expedited. It goes a lot quicker. If someone has a fender bender out front and they file a lawsuit, they've got to stand in line and wait behind every other case filed before them before they get a trial date. That's not the case with mesothelioma cases. You can get what's known as preference. And typically, once you file for preference, which is maybe, say, a month after filing a lawsuit, you can have a trial date within 6 months. So from start to finish, let's just say a year on a mesothelioma trial. Now, on top of that, you've got all the bankruptcy claims that you're filing. Those might go on for years, the bankruptcy claims following a big mesothelioma trial. You typically file those after you have settled or gone to trial in your lawsuit. Those take a while to be reviewed by these trusts. You've got to wait in line. They don't always pass them on the first filing, and they do take some time. I want to say, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I tell clients that, in a way, there's a start and there's when you're going to see most of the money in your case, but I never close a case. And the reason I don't close any cases is because of those bankrupt trust funds. They get evaluated by the court or their analyst or their auditors every couple of years. And while I just mentioned how I'm curious where that $50 billion is, there is a few trust funds that have more money than anticipated. And when a trust fund has more money than anticipated, it pays all victims, including old victims, past victims, additional monies. And so I may have passed a claim for somebody 15 years ago. And now the trust fund in 2025, AP Green did it, Shook and Fletcher, these are two trust funds, just did it, evaluated and determined, hey, the amount that we should pay each victim should be more because we have more money than we anticipated in 2025. So not only are we going to pay every victim more going forward, all those victims we paid in the past, they should each get a little bit of additional money too. And if I closed out those cases, then I have no client to pay and I just have to send the money right back to the trust. And so I'll have clients call me and know, I haven't gotten them anything in 10 or 15 years and I might be sending them checks. Or they might call me and say, hey, I haven't heard from you in 5 years. Is my case closed? And I'll say, I'm not closing your case because there's a chance you're going to get more money. And if I close your case, I can't pay you. So, right. But on top of that, I do want to say that, there are technical rules that I don't think a lot of the lawyers around the country know, which in some cases allow us to go back to old cases and try to file them with some of these bankruptcy trust funds. And just to quickly give you an idea of how valuable these trust funds are and how these technical rules can really benefit a client, we had a client who was exposed to one of the trust fund companies. Their name is Thorpe Insulation. They were an insulation contractor who did work throughout Southern California with Johns Manville products. Excuse me. And this client who died over 20 years ago, so you would think the statute of limitation would have run, of mesothelioma. The lawyer asked me, could I take a look at their case and see if there was anything I can do? So I went back and looked at their case and I said, because of this technical exception, I think maybe I can file a claim with a company called Thorpe Insulation for that client. Can you double check your file and make sure you never settled with Thorpe Insulation? Because if they settled with them, obviously I couldn't file the claim. Well, they had never settled with Thorpe Insulation. So we went ahead and filed a claim. And I don't want to laugh, but the guy would be about 125 years old today. Okay. So we're filing a claim on behalf of his children. Okay. Right. Who called the office after like 8 years and said, hey, is there anything else you can do on this case? So the first time we filed it, it came back deficient, meaning there was something that we needed to cure, but I could tell we could cure it. And I could also tell, hey, if we could cure this, this is going to be a real valuable claim for this family. And again, this is one claim with one of the 60 trust funds. And again, this is one of the most valuable of the trust funds, but still just one claim with one of the 60. The claim paid yesterday. As a matter, I was looking for the exact figure on my desk, but I'll just give you an estimate. $1.214 million.
Nice.
1.2.
That's amazing.
One claim for one victim with one trust. And so, and I've never met this family, because it was referred to me by a firm out in San Diego. But I can't even imagine how excited this family is going to be.
Do they know yet?
Well, they signed the rules. They knew they were getting a settlement, and they knew it was big, but they didn't realize it was this big.
Big, right.
And the reason is because some of the bankrupt trust funds add in a cost of living adjustment and inflation from the time they went bankrupt. They knew they were actually getting about $800,000, but they didn't know it was going to be $1.2 million, which covers all the lawyer fees and everything else. So I think their checks may be about $900,000.
Wow. Michael, are they subject to taxes on the settlement?
Believe it or not, they're not. Because,
wow.
What do we call them? Income taxes. Those are income taxes when you earn income. This is not income. This is considered what's known as a personal injury settlement. And, most of us don't look at tax forms. I don't either. I'm not an accountant. But every tax form, there's a box. I forget which box it is. It's, we all look at the W-2 and we fill in whatever our wages were. There's a box for personal injury settlement, which is separate, completely separate. And the amount of taxes that every client that I have ever had has paid is exactly this, a big zero on personal injury settlements and trust fund settlements. Now, I can't say maybe there is a settlement that is for loss of income for a deceased person in some of these multi-million-dollar cases, and maybe they have to pay a partial income tax on that. But 30 years, my clients, all personal injury settlements, zero taxes.
Incredible.
I know. So that family, 900,000 in the bank, straight in the bank.
I keep still thinking the day we first started talking on the phone, and I was wondering if there was enough to talk about. And here I'm looking at, oh my God, I've got 2 more pages of questions.
So we'll be good next month?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is
just making sure.
And this is a very important show because, most people know about bankruptcy or, you commit a crime, you're going to jail. But in this area, there's so many people out there who do not understand. And I want to do this. We got about 2 minutes left. The last question is, because I've had 3 people now ask, how do you know if you are suffering from meso?
It's a great question. It's typically symptomatic of things like breathing difficulties, a shallow cough that won't go away. A lot of people get diagnosed with pneumonia is one of the first things you see because fluid builds up on the lungs and then they drain the fluid and they think it's a pneumonia. And then if the fluid comes back, then you've got a big problem, 1. Or 2, sometimes that fluid won't be clear fluid. It will be something that gives the pathologist or the doctor some concern. So they will then do a biopsy on some of the tissue in that fluid if they can, or do a biopsy after taking out some of that fluid. But, it's one of those things, a cough, chest pain, pain on the side. These are just things that clients have told me, a cough that won't go away, a lingering thing. walking upstairs and getting short of breath. Hey, I never used to get short of breath, and everyone attributes it to their age, but it just sort of gets worse. That would be the big one, Steve. All right, I know we're out of time.
How do people reach you, Michael?
Well, we've got a call center, 1-800-970-DUST. That is 24/7. Direct to my office, 415-895-5175. And you can always call my mobile phone at 415-307-2119. And hopefully I hear from you. Thanks again, Steve.
Michael will be back again with us next month. We're so lucky to have you, Michael.
Thanks, Steve.
Go Dodgers.
Oh, you like them. All right. Let's keep it going. It should be a good World Series. Thanks again.
That's attorney Michael Mendelbrot. That's it for us today. We'll be back again with you next week with more Ask the Experts.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Experts show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.